Hi, my name's Rowena. And last Christmas Eve, while pouring wine for a dinner I helped plan, I smiled and said, "I'm excited for our Hawaii trip tomorrow." My sister laughed. My parents? They said, "There's no room in the car." They didn't just forget me. They designed it that way. But that wasn't the beginning. There was the suitcase I paid for, gifted to someone else. A spa reservation I booked, for a trip I wasn't invited to. And the guest list? It didn't lie. It never had my name to begin with. Why did they need me to build the trip, but not be part of it? And how long had they been erasing me while smiling to my face? Christmas Eve dinner always came with a certain script in our household. The roast was always overcooked. The wine was whatever red mom could get on sale. And my Lise, my older sister, would dominate the conversation while everyone else nodded like her personal fan club. This year, though, something felt different even before I stepped into my parents' dining room. As I walked in, I was greeted by the smell of garlic mashed potatoes and a faint cloud of Melis's designer perfume. She was already seated at the head of the table, her elbows on the table like always, talking about the spa appointment she had booked for her Hawaii reset, her words. "We've got facials on the second day and hot stone massages before the luau night," she gushed. No one asked if I was joining. No one looked up when I took off my coat and carefully draped it over the back of the only empty chair, always the one at the end of the table, half blocked by the sideboard. Dad nodded at me once, lifted his glass, and went back to slicing the roast. Mom passed the cranberry sauce to Lazaro, Melis's husband, who muttered a quiet thank you, then laughed when Melis jokingly complained that she had to choose between snorkeling or tanning first. I waited, patiently, for someone to loop me into the conversation. Just a glance. A single, "What about you, Ro?" would have been enough, but no. So I smiled and tried anyway. "I'm excited for the trip too," I said, a little louder than I intended. "I found this snorkeling spot near the reef that's supposed to be amazing. I bookmarked it to share." They all froze. Mom set down her fork. Dad didn't stop slicing the roast, but his jaw tightened. Melis blinked once, then smirked like she had been waiting for this exact moment. "Oh, sweetie," she said, voice syrupy, "there's no room in the car." I laughed, a dry, confused chuckle that felt forced even to my own ears. "Wait, what?" I looked around. No one answered. I thought, I started, then stopped. No one looked at me directly. Dad cleared his throat. "The SUV only has so much space," he said without looking up. "With Melis and Lazaro, and your mother and me, it fills up." "You mean you planned a 4-person trip?" I asked, tone sharper than I wanted. "Don't make this weird," Mom interjected. "Let's just enjoy tonight. It's Christmas Eve." "It's not weird, Mom. It's cruel," I said quietly. Melis waved her hand. "Don't be so sensitive. You know you hate group travel anyway." My throat tightened. I tried to think clearly. I had helped Mom compare resort packages 3 weeks ago. I had Venmo'd Dad for the deposit on the hotel because he said his card was acting up. I had sent Melis a curated list of restaurants on the Big Island just in case. And now? Now there was no room in the car. I didn't scream. I didn't throw my wine glass across the room or storm out. I nodded slowly, like someone finally understanding the punchline of a joke that took too long to land. That moment didn't just hurt me, I thought. It clarified everything. Later, as I sat there watching Melis show Lazaro a Pinterest board of her beach outfits, I couldn't help but notice she mentioned nothing about packing sunscreen. Which was interesting, because 2 weeks earlier, she had asked me specifically about reef-safe brands, and I'd ordered her a bottle. Apparently, she just didn't remember, or didn't want to. I flashed back to when she was talking to Mom on speaker about matching swimsuits for their mother-daughter spa morning. I had been in the room. No one had thought to ask if I even liked spa days. "If you're not at the table," I murmured to myself, "you're probably on the menu." I passed the green beans when asked. I poured wine for everyone. No one thanked me. Melis got seconds before I took my first bite. By dessert, my hands were trembling under the table, not from anger, but from the weight of recognition. I had spent years showing up, playing the role of the flexible one, the responsible daughter who didn't cause drama. But now I saw it. I wasn't just overlooked. I was strategically ignored. When dinner ended, I stood and gathered plates. Mom touched my shoulder and whispered, "You don't have to clean up." "I know," I said, "but someone should." As I rinsed the dishes alone in the kitchen, their laughter floated in from the other room, light and unbothered. I stared at the backsplash tiles and thought about the last time I felt truly part of this family. I couldn't recall. Then I wiped my hands on a dish towel, reached for my phone, and opened my reminders app. I typed just one sentence. "Check flight availability tomorrow morning." They thought I'd cry. I didn't. I set a reminder on my phone. I didn't sleep. I laid in bed for hours, staring at the ceiling, listening to the faint hum of the heater kicking on and off. By the time the first light crept through the window, I was already sitting at the kitchen table, cradling a cup of coffee I couldn't taste. I opened my laptop out of instinct. The familiar glow of the screen felt safer than my thoughts. My cursor hovered over the browser history, resort links, discount codes, a shared spreadsheet Malis never updated. All things I'd touched, tweaked, coordinated. I clicked on the airline confirmation email I had helped organize. My heart didn't race. It sank, slow and heavy. There it was. 4 names. Dad, Mom, Malis, Lazaro, and one I didn't recognize. I blinked, refreshed, looked again. I wasn't there. The 5th name, in the spot that should have held mine, was someone else. Someone completely new. Someone they hadn't even bothered to introduce. I built this entire itinerary, I whispered to no one. I checked every field, passenger info, seat assignments, even dietary preferences. My fingerprints were on everything but the guest list. That seat had never been mine. I stared at the screen, willing my name to appear. But it didn't. They didn't forget me. They removed me. When I finally stood, my legs felt unsteady. I needed air. Instead, I picked up my phone and called the resort, just to confirm what I already feared. "Hi," I said, trying to sound casual. "I'm calling on behalf of the Morgan party. Just wanted to check that everything's set for the group arriving tomorrow." The woman on the other end was cheerful. "Yes, of course. Let me pull up the reservation. Okay, I see 4 rooms booked under the Morgan name. 2 remain unassigned, actually, likely for guests yet to confirm." My fingers twitched. "So, 2 unassigned?" "Yes, ma'am. The system shows availability within the family block." I thanked her, hung up, and set my phone down slowly. So there was room. There had always been room. I just wasn't included. No room didn't mean physical space. It meant me. I sat back down and opened my email, scrolling through old threads with Mom. Subject: "Let me know if you need help booking things." Her reply: "We'll talk about it later." Later never came. Weeks ago, I sent her links to excursions, spa packages. I offered to apply my employee discount to the hotel. Each message was met with polite vagueness. Now I saw it for what it was: delay tactics, a smokescreen to keep me busy while they finalized the plans. Without me. I wasn't missed. I was deliberately excluded. That sting settled low and deep in my chest. They used me, quietly, efficiently. And then they erased me. I glanced around my apartment. It looked the same, quiet, tidy. But now it felt smaller. Not from the walls closing in, but from the sudden, sharp awareness that I had outgrown needing their approval. It wasn't just about the trip. It was about years of moments like this, disguised as misunderstandings. There was the time they sent my birthday card blank, claiming the ink must have faded. Or when I was 27 and told to sit at the kids' table during Thanksgiving because the main table was full. Or the way Dad never used my name in public. Always kiddo, like I didn't warrant a title. These weren't accidents. They were patterns. When someone never prepares a seat for you, I muttered, they never planned on you staying. I took another sip of my now cold coffee and opened a new tab. flights to Honolulu. I wasn't even sure why I was doing it. Maybe just to prove I could. Maybe to remind myself that I still had choices. I didn't click purchase. Not yet. I bookmarked the cheapest one. Then, I opened my journal and wrote a single line. I won't beg for a seat. I'll build the damn flight path. I closed my notebook, shut the laptop, and leaned back in my chair. They had 10 hours left to change everything. They didn't. The light outside had shifted from gray to gold by the time I stood up. My coffee, still half full, had gone cold hours ago. I carried the mug to the sink and stood there longer than necessary, my fingertips resting on the ceramic, like they might still absorb warmth. I didn't cry. I didn't pace or scream or even mutter. I was past fury. What replaced it was weightless, like the clarity that comes right after an earthquake, when the ground stops shaking and all that's left is the wreckage you can finally see. I opened my photo app, not because I wanted to reminisce, but because it gave me something to do with my hands. Scrolling, until I landed on a screenshot Melis had sent me 2 weeks ago, a blurry picture of her cocktail with the caption, "Unplanned dinner, but everyone made it." At the time, I'd replied with a heart emoji and something like, "Looks fun." It didn't register that I hadn't been invited. I chalked it up to a casual last-minute thing, but as I stared at the image again, now through the filter of everything that had happened, I noticed more. There was my Aunt Trish, seated next to Lazaro, her silver bracelet catching the light. My aunt hadn't visited in over a year. If they had time to invite her, they had time to text me. I zoomed in. Empty seat between Maelis and my mom. Not actually full, just not mine. "It wasn't that they forgot me," I murmured. "They intentionally placed me elsewhere, out of frame." I dropped my phone on the couch and opened my messages. My thumb hovered for a beat before I tapped Mom's name. Me. Did I miss something? Did I upset someone? A pause. Then her reply, the kind that closes doors instead of opening them. "Mom, don't make this bigger than it is. Just miscommunication. Isn't that what they always say when you finally notice the patterns they've been hoping you wouldn't?" I stared at the text. Sometimes what they call miscommunication is just your clarity making them uncomfortable, I said out loud. I didn't know if I heard that from a podcast or made it up, but either way, it felt true. So I stopped asking questions. Instead, I opened my notebook and wrote a list. Not a to-do list. A what I gave list. Planned Melis's bridal shower solo. Took 2 unpaid days off work to decorate the venue. Lent Dad $800 for his truck repairs. Never saw it again. Helped Mom move her garden planters every spring without once being asked if I liked gardening. Canceled my own birthday dinner last year when Dad said he had a stomach thing. None of it had earned me a seat. Not at the table, not in the car, and certainly not in their priorities. I stood and opened the fridge, suddenly ravenous. My fingers landed on the cranberry chutney I had made for the Hawaii trip, my grandmother's recipe. I'd portioned it in a mason jar, labeled it in my best handwriting. Untouched. I pulled it out, unscrewed the lid, and ate a spoonful directly from the jar. Sweet. Tart. Pointless. They didn't fail to include me, I whispered. They succeeded in excluding me. And that was the real heartbreak, not the oversight, but the precision. The way they executed my erasure with surgical calm, like they'd rehearsed it. My phone buzzed. A notification. Lazaro tagged you in a photo. I frowned. The image loaded slowly. It was a shot from that same dinner. Maelis beaming, her drink lifted mid-toast. But this time, the caption was different. "Wish you were here." I stared at it, not because it changed anything, but because, for a brief second, I felt seen. Not accepted, not embraced. Just noticed. And for a moment, I wasn't invisible anymore. Just misplaced. That evening, I didn't turn on any lights in the apartment. I moved in shadows, letting the faint glow of the screen guide me. My living room smelled faintly of cloves from the candle I'd forgotten to blow out, the air still with a heaviness that clung to my chest. I opened my email like I'd done hundreds of times before, except tonight I wasn't looking for updates. I was looking for evidence. Scrolling through the old chains with Malis and Mom felt like dissecting a crime scene. Each line reread with fresh eyes revealed things I'd once skimmed past. Dismissive phrasing, shallow pleasantries, and constant delays. That's when I saw the charge. A notification popped up from my credit card provider, one I rarely used. It was a purchase from last week, an $860 charge at a boutique luggage retailer downtown. The store I'd once suggested for a group gift idea for Malis. I clicked through to the transaction history. I had paid for the suitcase. Somehow, I forgot. Or more accurately, I hadn't realized they hadn't paid me back. I remembered emailing Mom the link, offering to buy it first since it was on sale. I joked, "Just Venmo me when you get a chance." They never did. I opened Instagram, feeling my stomach tighten before the screen even loaded. There she was, Malis, standing in front of her fireplace, posing with a monogrammed suitcase. The caption read, "When your parents know exactly what you need for a perfect island escape. Love you guys." Tagged. Mom. Dad. Not me. I screenshotted it, saved it into a folder I titled, "For Later," and sat in silence. I didn't text her. I didn't call Mom. I didn't even let myself cry. There was a kind of grief that no longer needed tears. That's when I opened the forwarded travel email. It had been sent to the agency we all used. I'd been CC'd weeks ago when I was still helping them price match options and coordinate arrivals. I skimmed past the opening until I found the line I hadn't paid attention to before. "We'll need our assistant, Rowena, to confirm the logistics for the rooms and transfers." Our assistant. Assistant. The same daughter who booked every reservation. The same daughter who helped them upgrade their room through a personal contact at the agency. The same daughter who just got demoted in one sentence to a role beneath familial inclusion. "You don't call your daughter an assistant," I whispered, "unless that's all she ever was to you." Something snapped. Not dramatically, not loud. Just quiet and final. I stood, walked to my desk, and pulled out a folder. Then I began printing. Credit card receipts, booking confirmations, snippets from emails and text threads where I'd offered help and been brushed off. A photo of the suitcase captioned with a lie. It wasn't for drama. It wasn't for revenge. It was for clarity. "It's not a confrontation if you don't walk into it empty-handed," I said to myself, watching the printer hum to life. Older people, especially the ones who had to endure polite betrayals, would understand. There's a dignity in being precise. I didn't need to yell. I needed to be right and ready. I laid out each paper like puzzle pieces, arranging them chronologically. The timeline told a story no one had spoken out loud, one where I was used, repurposed, and discarded, all with smiling emojis and signatures that said, "Love you, kiddo." I was done chasing their recognition. This wasn't about being let in. This was about walking out and making sure the door hit on the way out. They handed me the script, I thought, stacking the papers neatly. They just forgot I could read. I opened a new Google Doc and typed the title in bold at the top. Trip reclaimed underneath. I began drafting my backup plan. Not just emotional closure, but logistical disruption. If I wasn't riding in their car, then maybe they wouldn't be riding in one either. If I wasn't in the suite, maybe they wouldn't have one to enter. If I wasn't on the flight manifest, maybe their seat assignments were about to get very interesting. I didn't need to sabotage. I only needed to return the energy they'd given me, discreet, quiet, and absolute. The cursor blinked at me like it was waiting for permission. I smiled. If I had no seat in their car, I typed, I'd make sure they had no ride at all. The lights in my apartment glowed soft amber by the time I reopened my laptop. Outside, the street was quiet. Somewhere down the block, someone's Christmas lights blinked in steady rhythm. Red, white, green. My apartment was silent, save for the quiet hum of the heater and the occasional clink of ceramic when I moved my mug. I clicked open a folder on my desktop and renamed it Family Receipts. Then I started collecting the email trails, screenshots, PDFs of hotel confirmations I helped generate. I had spent so much time being polite, gracious, understanding, low maintenance. Now I was building a case, not for anyone else, for myself. I knew I hadn't imagined it. The omissions, the sleights of hand passed off as jokes. But putting it all into one place made it unignorable. And then it happened. While clearing some shared digital folders I had access to, an old backup from Mom's laptop she'd once synced with mine, I found a calendar invite. Subject: Hawaii planning. Don't include Rowena yet. My stomach dropped. The body of the invite was short, direct. We'll find a way to explain it after. Sent from Milas. Accepted by Mom. No note, no hesitation. So this wasn't passive exclusion. It was precision planning. I stared at the timestamp, nearly 6 weeks ago. 6 weeks of helping, suggesting, forwarding travel packages. 6 weeks of showing up while they plotted how to leave me out and clean up the story later. They didn't forget me, I said aloud. They excluded me in advance, with intent. I opened the drawer where I had tossed the unopened holiday card that arrived 2 days earlier. I hadn't wanted to deal with it then. I slid a finger under the envelope flap and pulled it out. The usual pre-printed script in looping cursive, wishing you joy and peace this season. Signed at the bottom. Love, Harold, Yvonne, Malis, Lazaro. My name wasn't there, not even as an afterthought. I stared at the empty space below Lazaro's name. There was room. They just left it blank. Omissions don't happen by accident, I murmured. Especially when you've seen the final proof. I laid the card beside my laptop, then opened a new email draft. Subject: You don't need to reply. I stared at the blinking cursor for a long time, then began typing. Thank you for reminding me that kindness does not guarantee a seat at your table, that being helpful does not entitle me to humanity. Next year, save yourself the postage. I've updated my forwarding address, emotionally, not physically. I didn't send it. I never planned to. I just needed to see the words outside my head. I closed the draft, sat back, and looked around my apartment. Every Thanksgiving, I was the last to leave their house, stacking dishes, wiping counters, storing leftovers Malis wouldn't touch, but insisted be saved. No one asked me to do it, but no one told me to stop either. 2 years ago, when my dad's transmission failed, I gave him $800 without question. He said, I'll get it back to you next paycheck. He never mentioned it again. They never saw me as family. They saw me as function. I wasn't a daughter. I was a system, efficient, quiet, reliable. I closed the family receipts folder and stared at my screen. Then I reached for my phone. There's a certain rush when you do something that would have once felt unthinkable, like cracking a window after a decade of stale air. I downloaded a travel app I'd never used before, one that let you book anonymously. There was a suite at the resort still listed under my name. My old contact info. The one from when I'd originally initiated the booking as a placeholder. They never changed it. I tapped through screens quickly, my fingers steady. The double-booked room, the unassigned suite, a few identity tweaks here and there. Maybe I'd check in for them. They wouldn't notice until it was too late. And that was exactly the point. It was still dark when I sat back down at my kitchen table. The mug of coffee I'd left there the night before was lukewarm, but I took a sip anyway. I didn't need caffeine. I needed ritual. The kind of ritual that told my brain, this is war, but we're going to fight it clean. The glow of my laptop greeted me like an accomplice. I opened the folder I'd labeled Family Receipts and double-clicked on the image I couldn't stop thinking about. There it was again, that photo from the trip prep dinner Malis had posted weeks ago, the one I thought nothing of at first. I zoomed in on the group seated around the table, Mom laughing too hard at something, Dad mid-chew, Lazaro holding up a beer. And me? I wasn't there. Not just in person. I wasn't even in the cropped version they posted, but I remembered that night. I had actually stopped by to drop off a care package of wine and dessert. I had even taken the original photo. I scrolled further back in my phone gallery and found the unedited picture. There I was, standing awkwardly at the edge, like a waiter photobombing a birthday party. They'd literally cropped me out. Not metaphorically, not symbolically, literally. Sometimes they don't have to uninvite you, I whispered. They just erase you from the memory. I clicked save. Next, I grabbed the iPad I had gifted Mom last year for Christmas. She still hadn't changed the password. I opened the Messages app, and the bubble from Dad's name opened automatically. And that's when I saw it. A new group thread, identical to the one I had once been part of. Same people, same title. Except my name was missing. Everything they used to coordinate had gone through that thread. Flight confirmations, hotel updates, spa bookings. An inside joke about leaving the fifth wheel behind, complete with a laughing emoji from Malis. There was never a confrontation, no dramatic text exchange, no phone call saying, "This isn't working." They didn't explode. They just left the room and started a new one without me. My finger hovered over the screen. Then I screenshot the entire thread. I emailed it to myself. I spent the next 2 hours compiling old receipts, confirmation emails with my name as the original point of contact, the photo they cropped, the new thread that excluded me. They thought strength meant yelling, making a scene, crying in the driveway with mascara running and a bottle of Chardonnay in hand. I had learned otherwise. Strength was printing the email where your mother called you the assistant. Strength was drawing a red box around the part where your father asked if the travel agent could remove Rowena from CC. She's done her part. Strength was sitting in silence and preparing like you were getting ready for a deposition. I wasn't burning bridges. I was checking if they had ever been connected on my side. Mid-morning light crept through the blinds. The apartment warmed, but I didn't notice. I was standing in the hallway, arms full of printed pages, like legal briefs ready for a trial no one had scheduled, but one I was ready for. No more hoping to be seen. Now I was documenting the evidence of why I never had been. By the time I'd laid everything out on the dining table, it resembled a crime board. The kind you see in cold case documentaries, lines connecting statements to images to bank statements. Except this case wasn't about a missing person. It was about a person who was deliberately deleted and who finally noticed. I walked over to my laptop one more time and logged into the travel agency portal. I still had access under my old credentials. I had never been removed as the primary contact, and they had never bothered to update the email address on file. I clicked on the reservation, then on Modify Guest. I didn't cancel anything. That would have sent alerts. I changed the names, delayed the check-in date by 48 hours, swapped the billing contact to an archived payment method that I knew would fail authorization. I requested a manual reconfirmation from the concierge team. They wouldn't notice. Not until they were already en route. They wanted me invisible. I'd show them how invisible feels. The sunlight crept through the curtains, like it had something to confess. I sat cross-legged on the floor in front of my laptop, the morning stretching into afternoon without my noticing. The final pieces of my plan were coming together, not out of pettiness, but because clarity brings a kind of calm. I wasn't acting from rage. I was executing with purpose. I reviewed the resort reservations once more. Guest count, 5. Except the 5th name wasn't mine. It was someone named Declan Stroud. I didn't know a Declan. Curious, I opened Malis's Instagram account. It didn't take long to find him. Tagged in a photo from a wine bar 3 weeks ago, arm draped casually around her shoulders, captioned, "Grateful for this man and his spontaneous spirit." I clicked on his profile. Newly created, barely a dozen posts. I knew Milas's type. She rotated them seasonally, like handbags. And yet, he got the 5th seat. I stared at the itinerary again. There was room, just not for the one who'd known them her entire life. "There it is," I whispered. "Blood doesn't always buy space. It's charisma and convenience that do. I minimized the window and stood up to stretch, my joints cracking from sitting too long. Walking into the kitchen, I grabbed the last of the sparkling water from the fridge and cracked it open, the hiss of carbonation the only sound in the room. Back at the table, I picked up my phone and opened Facebook. Big mistake. There, pinned to the top of Mom's page, was a memory from 2 Christmases ago. A picture of me and David, my ex, standing in front of the tree at my parents' house. Both of us wearing matching sweaters with tangled lights. I'd forgotten that photo even existed. But what got me wasn't the image, it was the caption. Some people are always family. Love this guy. I wasn't tagged. I wasn't even mentioned. The guy I broke up with over a year ago, after he ghosted me during a health scare, was apparently still a better candidate for holiday affection than the daughter who bought the tree that year. I laughed. A sharp, joyless sound. Even people I left behind still outrank me in their narrative. I didn't bother commenting. What would I say? Hey, Mom. Love how you chose my ex over me again. Merry Christmas! I put the phone down and stared out the window. The trees lining the street swayed gently in the breeze, their branches bare, unapologetic. I wished I were more like them. I pulled out my journal and flipped to a blank page. I wrote down 3 words. Needed, not wanted. The thing is, you don't always realize how alone you are until the silences start overlapping. The text threads where you're the only one still replying. The times your idea gets pitched back to you in someone else's words. The way your birthday gets mentioned in passing, if at all, while everyone else gets group dinners and streamers. I had been useful, not cherished. They liked me best when I was solving their problems, not presenting one of my own. I closed the journal, stood up, and walked slowly back to the laptop. My heart wasn't racing. It had finally steadied. I pulled up the resort dashboard again. Click, modify reservation. I changed Declan's name to a placeholder, delayed the check-in by 24 hours, removed one of the suite upgrades. Small enough moves not to raise flags with the hotel staff. Big enough to derail the timeline they had so carefully crafted. If Maelys wanted her new man to see the best of the family, I'd give him exactly that. Without the trip. I hovered over the save button, then clicked. The screen refreshed. Confirmation updated. I leaned back in my chair, eyes closed for a beat. If Maelys wanted to impress her new +1, she should have started with honesty. The first text came in just after 7:45 a.m. A shaky thumbs-up emoji from Mom. Then a follow-up. Boarding now, love you. I didn't reply. By then, I was already lounging on a poolside cabana at the resort, the ocean air heavy with sea salt and blooming hibiscus. The staff had greeted me like any other guest. No idea that I had once been a ghost in this reservation. No questions, just warm towels and welcome drinks. The irony? They arrived at Logan Airport smiling, wheeling their overpriced luggage across polished tiles, chatting about the spa. Maelys posted a selfie from the gate. Her lips puckered, sunglasses perched high like she was born for boarding zones. And then it started. Back at my hotel suite, yes, my suite, I opened my tablet and clicked on the folder labeled Archived Family Docs. I hadn't wanted to revisit that conversation with Grandma Ruth, but something pushed me to. It was a voice memo. I had saved it out of guilt, thinking one day I'd make a photo slideshow with her favorite jazz music. She was fading fast by then, lucid only in short bursts. But her words, clear as crystal. Don't let them rewrite the ending row. I left you something. I made sure it's yours. But they don't see you the way I do. I had never asked what she meant. I thought she was talking about emotional closure, a metaphor, the way old people say things layered in riddles. But now, after what they'd done, it hit differently. So I checked. I logged into the family's shared email archive, something I still had access to from when I'd helped Dad scan estate paperwork after Grandma passed. There it was. An attachment titled Addendum, Ruth Morgan Estate Trust, dated 5 days before her death. It named me, specifically, a portion of her stock portfolio and rights to the cabin in Vermont, and a note, Rowena has always shown up when it mattered. This is for her. It had been removed from the final version that went to probate. Gone. Vanished. They not only stole a trip, they erased my inheritance and pretended it never existed. At that moment, my phone vibrated violently against the teakwood lounge chair. Mailless. A single text. Call me, now. Then another, from Dad. Are you messing with the hotel? I muted the device and turned to my side, adjusting my sun hat. From the corner of my eye, a staff member approached with a tray of pineapple juice and a confused expression. Miss Morgan, he said, we just received a call from another guest, also under the name Morgan, asking about your suite. They say it's theirs. I sipped slowly, then smiled. Tell them I said aloha. At that very moment, Mailless and company had just landed in Honolulu, excited and oblivious, until they got to the reservation desk. Reservation not found, the clerk repeated, eyes on her screen. Mailless leaned in. That's impossible. It was confirmed weeks ago. I see a booking, but it's been modified. Check-in isn't until tomorrow, and the guest list has changed. I'd be happy to help rebook accommodations. Dad's voice sharp and low. What do you mean changed? The staff member smiled politely. Would you like to speak to the person listed as the primary contact? That's when Mailless lost it. You said Rowena wasn't going. You said you handled it, she shouted at Mom, loud enough for two travelers at the next counter to pause mid-conversation. I wasn't there to see it, but I didn't have to. I knew Mailless's tone, the pitch it reached when she was cornered, and the performance cracked. And Mom's reply? Likely something passive. I didn't think she'd go through with anything. I didn't need to scream. I just needed them to hear each other clearly. They weren't locked out. They were off script. And without me, they never learned how to improvise. The last ping of the day came as I flipped through a magazine, sunlight warming my legs. 3 missed calls. Dad? Mailless? A number I didn't recognize. The silence I gave them was louder than any door slam could have ever been. I didn't answer the first call, or the second. By the third, I simply silenced my phone, slid it under a towel, and let the ocean breeze drown out whatever panic was buzzing across the Pacific. I turned the page of the novel I'd brought, not because I was reading it, but because it gave my hands something to do while the rest of me unraveled quietly. The resort was calm. The staff moved with the grace of people who were used to catering to wealthy vacationers who needed everything but asked for nothing. It was oddly fitting. My family had always been the same, needing everything, asking for nothing, expecting me to fill in the silence with solutions. But this time, I didn't. At that exact hour, my parents, Mailless, and her +1 were stepping off the plane in Honolulu, sleep-deprived and sun-hungry, likely still coasting on the illusion that everything was going according to plan. Until they reached the resort check-in desk. I imagined it vividly. Miley smiling as she handed over her ID. Dad tapping his foot behind her. Mom digging for her sunglasses in the wrong purse. Then the moment. The confusion in the receptionist's voice. The glance between staff members. The clicking of keys. And then, I'm sorry, the reservation under this name has been modified. Voices rising. Mailless turning red. Modified how? The staff member explaining the check-in date was pushed to tomorrow, that the contact number had been changed, that the suite had been reassigned. And then, my note, written in calm black ink, handed over by the concierge. Enjoy the view. You missed it last time, too. That was mine. They didn't see the face of the person who handed it to them. They didn't need to. Because for once, the silence spoke louder than any confrontation I could have staged. Back at the resort, I ordered dinner early and made a reservation at the rooftop restaurant. Just me. No need to ask if anyone had dietary restrictions or if someone didn't like cilantro. As I sat with a glass of wine, watching the sky shift into indigo, I thought of all the times I'd made room for others, clearing space, changing plans, letting someone else go first. All my life, I sat quietly on the sidelines, hoping someone would notice I brought the chairs. Not anymore. Now, I booked the room, and the silence. Halfway through the meal, my phone vibrated again. I checked it this time. A text from Lazaro. "What you did was bold. You okay?" I stared at it for a long moment, then typed back, "I've never been more okay, or more alone, but in the right way." He replied once more. A single emoji, eyes wide, then nothing else. Maybe he got it, maybe he didn't, but at least one person in that group knew what they were looking at now. Me. Not the helper, not the extra, not the footnote. A little later, after dessert, I walked slowly back to my suite, letting the sound of the waves at night settle inside me. I drew a bath, lit the resort candle, and slipped into the water without needing anyone's permission or company. I almost missed the voicemail. It came just after I stepped out of the tub, wrapped in a robe, towel drying my hair. Dad. His voice was shaky, clipped, unusually slow. "When you come home, we need to talk." He didn't yell. He didn't threaten. He didn't even say I was wrong. He said when, not if, as if the door had never closed, as if I'd just wandered away for a bit. But I hadn't wandered. They had locked the door. I just found another way in. I listened to the message again, slower this time, letting the tone, not the words, tell me what it meant. It wasn't anger, it was discomfort. He didn't know what I was capable of until I showed him. The silence broke. But what came next wasn't peace. It was something I couldn't name yet. The sun had dipped low enough to touch the edge of the ocean when I stepped out onto the balcony. The horizon burned a soft amber, waves brushing the shore like they'd rehearsed it 1,000 times. I brought my phone with me, not to scroll, but to replay the voicemail one more time. Dad's voice played, slow and measured. "When you come home, we need to talk." It wasn't the words that got me, it was the way he said them. Like he was swallowing the apology before it reached the surface. Like he wasn't sure which version of me would be waiting when I did return. But I wasn't returning. Not to them. Not in the way they hoped. A breeze passed. I sat back in the lounger and watched 2 seagulls fight over a French fry on the beach below. Fitting, I thought. That had always been the dynamic. Scramble for scraps. Pretend it was a feast. They were still at the resort, checked into some last-minute downgraded room, fumbling through what remained of their itinerary. I imagined Maylise fuming as she asked the concierge if there were any openings for spa appointments that didn't include waitlisted beside them. They had money, but money didn't buy rhythm. It didn't buy grace under pressure, and it certainly didn't buy backup plans. The next morning, I heard they'd tried to switch suites. Found out the reservation under Mylis's name was flagged for verification. Card declined. Email mismatch. All breadcrumbs I had set without erasing a single trace. It wasn't that I got there first. It was that they had to admit I could. And that was the price. For years, Dad had joked I wouldn't survive a week alone. "You'd starve without Postmates," he once said, laughing over takeout ribs. Mylis piled on. She couldn't even organize a group brunch. Now, I was drinking hibiscus tea on a balcony they were never invited to. I wasn't surviving, I was thriving, with an itinerary of my own. "Let them sit in the discomfort I lived in for 28 years, I murmured. I picked up my tablet, opened the link my best friend Sarah had sent 2 weeks earlier. An article on gaslighting, particularly the kind that takes place inside polite families. I'd skimmed it before. This time, I read every word. It was eerie. The constant invalidation, the reframing of hurt as sensitivity, the rewriting of memories as just how you took it. I had lived every line, and for the first time, I said it out loud. I wasn't imagining patterns. I was just the only one honest enough to name them. When you grow up being gaslighted, it takes decades to trust your own sense of wrong. It's not until you're far enough away that the air starts to clear, and the truth doesn't feel like betrayal, but liberation. By the afternoon, things started to fall apart for them. Declan, Maylis's +1, cut his trip short, told her he didn't sign up for family chaos, and booked a flight out the next day. She didn't post about it, but I saw the photos come down, one by one. Dad called the resort for a reimbursement of the deposit, was told he wasn't listed as the billing party, that the corporate credit card used no longer matched the primary contact. I didn't laugh, but I didn't stop it either. Mom, she started texting. Thinking of you. Then another. Hope you're relaxing. We miss you. And finally, can we talk soon? None of them acknowledged the mess. Not the booking, not the erasure, not the years before any of this. Only the fallout. Like I was a storm they had hoped would pass without consequences. Late that night, as the stars began to scatter across the water, like diamonds tossed by mistake, my phone rang. Lazaro. I stared at it for a moment before answering. He didn't say much, just sat in silence for a few seconds before saying, I get it now. I waited, gave him space to fill that silence. He didn't, so I did. Too late for them, I said quietly. Not too late for you. He let out a breath. Yeah. We stayed on the line, neither of us rushing to hang up. It wasn't closure, but it was a crack. And if he called, who would be next? The sun hadn't fully crested the ocean yet when I stepped out onto the balcony. A thin mist hovered just above the waves, dissolving with each passing second. The world felt quiet, like it was still deciding whether to rise or roll over and sleep another hour. I wrapped my robe tighter and set my tea on the small table beside me. The ceramic clinked softly against the glass top. My phone buzzed on the cushion beside me, but I didn't reach for it. Instead, I opened my journal and began writing. No prompts, no goals, just thoughts spilling onto the page without permission. I wrote about the silence that followed Lazaro's call, about the tone in Dad's voicemail, about the strange calm I felt, not because anything had been fixed, but because I no longer needed it to be. My phone buzzed again. Mom. Hope you're well. A minute later, another one came in, this time from Milas. It was a photo, the hotel lobby, captioned, Fixed. That was it. I didn't reply, not because I was punishing them. I simply didn't feel obligated to anymore. I wasn't angry. I was done. Done hoping for apologies that would never sound sincere. Done shrinking myself so they'd feel comfortable. Done being the one who always showed up with arms full and walked away with nothing. I took a deep breath and opened the article Sarah had sent me, the one about emotional manipulation in families. I'd skimmed it once before, half resenting its accuracy, but this time I read slowly. Every paragraph felt like an old bruise being named. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't difficult. I wasn't ungrateful. I was gaslit, subtly, consistently, until I began rewriting my own history just to keep the peace. I highlighted a quote near the end. The moment you stop explaining yourself is the moment you start healing. I copied it into my journal, then added one line beneath it. This isn't a phase. This is the clarity I earned. Later that evening, I walked into a quiet local restaurant, just a block from the resort. No reservations needed, no waiting list. The hostess smiled and led me to a corner table with a view of the beach. As I settled in, an older couple was seated next to me, probably in their 70s. They reminded me of people I used to see at the town diner back home, familiar faces that never needed introductions. The man commented on my appetizer. I laughed. Before long, we were exchanging small stories. They didn't ask why I was alone. They didn't treat me like I needed fixing. We just existed in the same space, sharing warmth without expectation. At one point, the woman said, "You have kind eyes, the kind that notice everything and still choose softness." I blinked, nodded, smiled. I wasn't looking to be adopted, I told her gently. I just wanted to feel human again. And I did. After dinner, I walked along the beach barefoot, the sand still holding heat from the day. My phone buzzed again. Flight reminder. I opened the app and canceled it. Then, without hesitation, I booked a local tour around the island for the next morning. No return date. Going back meant picking up where they left me, I said out loud. I'd rather go forward from where I found myself. Back at the resort, I sat down on the bed and opened the family group chat. Then I hit delete. No ceremony, no announcement. Just gone. I didn't feel sad. I felt light. And for the first time, I opened a blank document on my laptop and titled it, "To the version of me who still waited for them." The letter poured out. You stood in rooms that never saw you. You kept holding out plates to people who only took. You measured your worth by their silence. But you're done now. She's free. You don't have to carry her anymore. I read it once, then closed the laptop. Tomorrow, I wouldn't need to say goodbye. I already had. The beach was mostly empty that morning, the sand still cool beneath my feet. A few joggers passed by, their footsteps light, their earbuds tucked in, their lives untouched by mine. I walked slowly, letting the ocean air fill my chest like it was washing something old out of me. I wasn't running from anything. I just wasn't carrying it anymore. Back in the suite, I zipped up my small suitcase. No clutter, no souvenirs. Just the things I arrived with. Except now, I wasn't leaving with the same weight. On the dresser sat a plain white envelope. Inside it, I'd tucked every receipt, every email thread, every piece of evidence that I hadn't imagined any of it. Copies of the booking confirmations I initiated, screenshots of the cropped photos, even the page from Grandma Ruth's estate that named me, then quietly disappeared from the final file. At the front of the envelope, I had written in tidy black ink, "For Harold Morgan." I handed it to the front desk manager with calm precision. "Please ensure this is delivered to Mr. Morgan upon his checkout, no earlier." She nodded, slipping it behind the counter like it was nothing more than a forgotten charger. Let them read the truth in silence, no opportunity to spin it in their favor. At that moment, my job was done. Across the resort, my parents sat stiffly at the breakfast buffet, tension spread between them like a second plate. Lazaro stirred his coffee in silence, eyes fixed on nothing. Milas had left the table already, stormed off after one more passive-aggressive remark from Mom and one final, "Don't start with me," from Dad. When the envelope arrived, the manager handed it to Dad directly. He opened it without a word. As he read, his hands started trembling, just slightly. He said nothing for a long while. Then, he folded the letter back into the envelope and pushed his plate away. When I was needed, I showed up. When I asked to be seen, you looked away. This time, I looked away first. He didn't speak, just stood up. Lazaro followed suit. They didn't finish breakfast. They checked out the next day. Separately. Sometimes justice doesn't scream. It just walks away louder than they expected. Back in Santa Rosa, I unpacked quickly and opened my laptop. I applied for a consulting contract abroad, something I'd put off for the past 2 years, because Mom said I was too far away already. This time, I didn't ask what they would think. I didn't ask if anyone needed me nearby. Some homes you leave. Some you rebuild where love doesn't require proof. Weeks passed, then months. The text thread stayed silent. And I didn't miss it. One afternoon, I sat at a quiet cafe on the corner of a street I hadn't walked before. My laptop was open, emails halfway typed. A plate of lemon shortbread sat next to my coffee. The server approached. She looked young, college-aged. "Ms. Morgan?" she asked politely, placing a refill on the table. I looked up, smiled. Not because someone finally saw me, but because now I saw myself. Some stories don't end with reunions. They end with reclamations.